Hi, this is Sarah from Dragon Con Theater and Performing Arts Unofficial. Today we are doing a virtual panel for Dragon Con on Shakespeare comedy, love, mistaken identities, and social satire. Um, Today I am not joined by Gary, but he will be on our other panels for Dragon Con. So make sure you tune in. We will be releasing those at about 10 a.m. every day during the convention. I am joined by these amazing panelists. So if all of you could introduce yourselves, Kate, starting with you.
Oh, sure. Hi, everybody. My name is Kate Osborne. I go by Katiosaurus on all corners of the internet, where I'm a full-time content creator. I talk a lot about neurodivergency, disability, sex, intimacy, and relationships. But before that, long before I was doing that, I actually got 2 master's degrees in Shakespeare from the American Shakespeare Center in Stanton, Virginia, where I worked for 3 years as their assistant stage manager. Met my husband there. I have 3 Shakespeare tattoos, so I feel qualified to be here.
Definitely. How about you, Stephanie?
Yeah, so hello, I'm Stephanie Crignola. I only have 1 master's degree in Shakespeare, so I'm half as good as Kate.
No!
But yeah, so I taught high school for a number of years. I've run my own Shakespeare theater company for the past decade or so. We specialize in pop-up one rehearsal productions and interactive educational shows. And I also host a podcast called Protest Too Much, where someone comes on, for example, maybe someone like Rivka, and we talk about who would be the biggest gossip in Shakespeare to win a high school superlative. We just do fun, silly, crazy matchups like that.
Awesome. How about you, Carly?
Hi, I'm Carly Dwyer. I'm coming from Salem, Massachusetts. I might be the only person here who doesn't have a master's in Shakespeare. But I do have a master's in theater and education. I currently work in interactive game design, but I come from a Shakespearean background. I basically, I have a goal of directing all of them before I die, and I'm 18 plays deep. Yeah, I'm getting to the sticky ones that are really hard to put up. But a lot of my progress into game design and interactive live action game design actually comes from working through Shakespeare. So I think I'm like listening to all these qualifications, like those are amazing. Kind of weird.
How about you, Rivka?
Hi, I'm Rivka Levine. I also do not have a master's in Shakespeare. I have a master's in performance, but always loved Shakespeare as one of those geeks that memorized all of Romeo and Juliet in high school because I could. And 18 years ago, just as I was getting out of grad school, the Atlanta Shakespeare Company, where I had been a patron for 10 years, I had already fallen in love with this theater, created a development department rather than the artistic director writing their grants. And the way this particular theater works, the Shakespeare Tavern Playhouse in Atlanta, is that the vast majority of their admin are also actors. So we have a real investment in the company. So I am both the grant writer and a member of the acting company, a teaching artist, and I have just started, I'm the regular music director, but I've just started composing original pieces for the Shakespeare plays as well.
That's awesome. Definitely. Well, I really appreciate all of you guys being here. I do not have a master's degree of any sort. So I'm just so happy to have all of you here to talk to us today. So you guys kind of got a little bit into this, but I was wondering what drew you to Shakespeare in the first place? Like, how did you get started? And Rivka, why don't you start with that?
Gosh, I think genuinely it was the language. My mother was an English major, and both of my parents were just very articulate and never baby talked me and my sister. They talked to us like adults. And so I grew up with this, not just a vocabulary, but a love of how language works. And so when I first read Shakespeare, I thought, this this really calls to me. And it felt good on my tongue, you know?
Definitely, I understand. How about you, Kate? How did Shakespeare become part of your life?
Oh gosh, I hope it doesn't sound too pretentious, but I was a kid growing up. I was a kid who was really good at school, and I kind of breezed through as a undiagnosed neurodivergent kid, which is rare. But I went the opposite direction, where I would like put all of my time and effort and self-worth into like academically succeeding. And Shakespeare was one of the first things that I ever encountered that made me slow down, and it made me really have to work at it and work hard to it. And a while later, when I was in grad school, I heard the story about how Judi Dench was talking about this like one time when she played Lady Macbeth. And she said that what was fascinating about Shakespeare was that performing Shakespeare is like looking at it through the facet of a diamond. And if you shift the diamond any sort of little tiny way, it completely changes the viewpoint. It completely changes the approach. It completely changes, the entire context. And so that's what I loved about it, because I could spend like 3.5 hours deep diving on like a comma, or I could just be like, and the entire play of Hamlet. So I can always just sort of define what I want to do based on that sort of facet. And I just love that. So that's my answer.
Yeah. How about you, Carly?
So also as a late in life, undiagnosed neurodivergent, and also raised by parents that did not treat us like kids at all. My dad sat me down and made me watch Kenneth Branagh's Henry V when I was in 5th grade. And like, I just like, it just made a huge impact. Like, I remember specifically the scene where he's delivered the tennis balls. I think it's like scene 1. He's delivered the tennis balls, and I remember being in 5th grade, and first, my first thought being like, oh my god, my dad's making me watch something on PBS with him. And that moment where like I was just like watching this like young king kind of be like the brazenness, like getting the insult, flipping it into a joke, turning it around on itself, and then like watching it all the way through, and just watching. And it's funny now to look back and like I remember thinking like Brana just looks so young as Henry V. And I mean, I'm in 5th grade. I am nowhere near that age group, but like I just hadn't seen like a youngish looking person on Masterpiece Theater yet, that wasn't like Oliver Twist. And so like so I was just so impressed. I was like, look at this kid. He's taken over France. He's got the Welsh longbow. Like, go. Like, and I was hooked. And then I was like the really overly ambitious 5th grader that was in a very small school district being like, I'm going to direct this, and like taking it to the principal with a pitch deck. And I did not direct it in 5th grade, but
I was going to say.
But I kind of was at that point. I was hooked. Like at that point, I was like, who else? Who else did he write about? Who else is awesome that Shakespeare wrote about? And at that point, I like dug my heels in so deep that even though the language is really challenging, I was like, no, I get it. And I was at that point determined. Like I was determined to discover all the people who were like sticking it to the system, even though I know Henry V was the system. But like, and it's, the diamond thing is that, and as a neurodivergent with a brain that goes a million miles a second, Shakespeare keeps giving.
It
like
does.
you can you can sit there and hyper focus on a first folio work on comma placement, or where is that capitalization, and you spend hours on a sentence, and yet you've gone miles, and you've gone decades, and you've gone back centuries, and you can go as deep as you want, or you can just turn to the high schoolers you're teaching and be like, it's a dick joke. Like, and like, yes, that is the 14th one, and let's keep a list of all the different ways we make them. Is it's not that Shakespeare can be whatever you want it to be, but Shakespeare is both accessible and very deep. Whenever I would, I taught high school for 13 years, and what I used to tell my students was, Shakespeare is not hard because he always says what he means, but he's just meaning many things at once. And yeah, and I think I've never fallen out of love with Shakespeare. So yeah, that's how I found him.
Awesome. How about you, Stephanie?
Yeah, so I feel like I've fallen in love with Shakespeare a lot of different times in my life. When I was in second grade, my older sister was in fourth grade, and she somehow bullied her teacher into letting her direct and star in a like 15-minute version of The Tempest. And I remember her like walking around her classroom in this cape that had like stars and moons on it as Prospero. And I was like, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Because at that point, my sister was still the coolest person I ever knew in my life. And so, not that she's not still, but like at that like really young age, it was a massive impression. Same thing as y'all. Always doing whatever I could to do more because I thought that's what I needed to do. And so my parents just kept giving me more. And Shakespeare is kind of where it landed. When I was an undergrad, the American Shakespeare Center came to our school. They did Midsummer with 4 actors. And I was like, that is the Shakespeare that I want to do. Like, that's the Shakespeare I'm in love with. Chaos. And then when I went to London to get my master's, my program wasn't performance-based. It was like, it was a text and transmission. So basically we read secretary hand and we looked at the folio and we approached it as if you were an editor. So like one of my professors was the general editor for Arden. So we would take it, erase it. And like y'all have said, where is like, this could be a comma because it's a comma, or it could be a comma because the press ran out of full stops. We'll never know. So I fell in love with it that way. And I was teaching high school at the time, and my dissertation was looking at Shakespearean performance for a 21st century student, looking through race, gender, and violence as lenses to like look at how approaching the plays in different ways resonates with kids or doesn't. And so I fell in love with it there, and then kept falling in love with it as I was teaching, started directing because no one else in my area would. So I was like, well, if no one else is going to do it, I'm just going to do it. Fell in love with direct, just like, it just kept making me fall in love over and over and over again. And still, like every time I have a conversation with someone new, I feel like I find something new and get exposed to something new and fall in love all over again.
Definitely. Well, wow, you guys all have pretty amazing stories right there. And I think you guys sort of touched on it again. Like, you're very good at predicting what I'm going to talk about next. But one of those things that Shakespeare is really well known for is like the wordplay and the clever language. They're all really important to his works. So in your opinion, how does that enhance like the comedic effect of his plays? And Carly, why don't you go ahead?
Oh wow. Okay, so I have to start. Okay.
Sorry.
I mean, this kind of goes back to like, again, one of my favorite word plays with Shakespeare that he uses in comedy is actually like, and it's like extra funny because it's his name, is the word will, and what will can mean. Like, will can mean like a determination. Will can mean like sexual desire, both for men and women. The whole phrase of like, where there's a will, there's a way, is like the amount of ways you can break that down. The amount, technically all of them could be right. And every single day an actor can play it a slightly different way, and they're still doing it right, and it still lands differently. And like, so now my brain is like bottlenecking a ton of million different quotes or comments I can make. So please jump in if you have something. But again, in the simpleness of just taking a word like will and how, especially like comedic women use it, like Beatrice, oh my God, I knew this was going to happen. I was going to blank on all the scenes, but she's like, like, what is your will? In talking to Benedict is she picking up on the flirtation? Is she calling him out on it? Is she actually just being like, what are we doing in this? Like, why are we standing here? Why are we talking? And the more you get to layer that, the more you get to draw out the complexities of the relationship, and the more you can kind of turn them on their heads a bit and get them like, and how does Benedict receive that comment? And does he receive that as a flirtation of like, hey, what are you into? And she's just like, let's just go. Like, and it's a simple word like will, and it comes up over and over and over again, especially in the comedies, and especially coming from the women, of these moments that they could be very directly flirting and being misunderstood, or they could be very directly not flirting and be misunderstood. And again, I just always love that it just ties back to his name as well. And same thing, it's like where is he saying, what is he going? I'll probably spin off of other people, but that was like when you first brought that question up and I was reading it through, I was just like, yeah, it's how I love the example of will and how many different ways it can be used in a single small sentence.
Sure, definitely. How about you, Stephanie? What do you think?
I love how much like plausible deniability it gives him, because yes, this play was being checked, it was being censored, and so much that sits on the page doesn't exist in a live performance. And so that like wink to the groundlings and giving power to people who don't have it anywhere else in their lives, like the power of comedy sits with them. And I think that that's just a really brilliant use of wordplay to bring something that isn't on the surface. And no one's really reading for double entendre when you're skimming through. It's why it works so much less well in a group setting if you're just reading it through, right? But I think that's my if I had to pick a favorite thing about it and why it works in comedy, I think that would be the thing.
How about you, Kate?
Oh man, my thing when I talk about Shakespeare is I always feel like I'm a Shakespeare scholar who doesn't actually care at all about Shakespeare. I care about the people that saw Shakespeare, right? Like that's what interests me, is like what was happening when these plays were being shown on stage for the first time. And I think that, and I know we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but there was such a consciousness, I think, to how Shakespeare created plays, with the idea that you weren't going to catch everything. You weren't going to, like, just the environment that they were being performed in resulted in the fact that you weren't going to catch every word. And so what he brilliantly does is he structures the rhetoric and he structures the verse and he structures the prose to be part of that environment and that sort of like very repetitive theatrical environment. And then you get the secondary sort of like, I don't know, one of my like weird hyperfixations is like original pronunciation. And like there's like different sort of, views on how much you can take that with or without a grain of salt. But I think of like just that sort of like Stephanie was saying, like that oral component of like the difference between from forth the fatal lines or from forth the fatal loins. And it's like, oh, that's funny. Like that's funny, Yeah, that's my answer. I'll just trail off in the middle of a sentence. That's good paneling.
If I could piggyback off of Katie, is also too, and like going back to sort of what Stephanie was saying, is the idea that like he's all like, he comes from the Midlands, and the Midlands spoke a very different dialect at the time, and we see Shakespeare working the Midland terms into his plays. And so going back to the plausible deniability is like, and again, the OP is, depending on which audience he's talking to, it can have different meanings. And that also plays off really well in the comedies too. And especially, the groundlings are speaking a different English than the court is speaking. And, and yes, they were highly censored. And I know there's a lot of like really wonderfully fun conspiracy theories there. But like the idea of like, how many different ways to work the language versus how many different ways the language works within that theater is another great way that he is kind of toying and telling different stories to different people at once. Sorry.
Don't apologize. Rivka, what do you think?
So one of the things that I love most about how the language enhances the comedy is there are no stage directions in Shakespeare. You really understand what you're doing because somebody before you have a line says, prithee, do not kneel to me. I guess I'm supposed to be kneeling there. And I love both the play on words and the understanding of how a scene might have been staged. Like one example in As You Like It. So Rosalind and Celia and Touchstone the clown have been walking for a very long time to get to the Forest of Arden. And Touchstone has a line to Celia, I would rather bear with you than bear you. So many times that scene is staged where he's been carrying Celia on his back. And I love that language. It's both a play on words and it tells you what might make the staging funny is if Rosalind is carrying one bag, Celia's carrying a parasol and is on Touchstone's back, and Touchstone is carrying all the other bags, right? Just because even as they trudge in before they speak a line, that's funny. And then one other quote came to mind, not as it enhances the comedy so much, but as the way in which it uses comedy to enhance character. The Merchant of Venice is not a show in which Shylock and Antonio get a whole lot of comedic lines or comedic moments. But one thing that I love in the very first scene where we meet Shylock, and there are many different ways of interpreting that, but I love that Antonio kind of snarkily says, are your something about are your gold, is your gold lambs and ewes, because he's just been talking about lambs and ewes, and Shylock answers, I cannot tell, I make it breed as fast. And I think that is a wonderful opportunity for this character that becomes so ugly to get to be sympathized by the audience. He's cracked a joke even when his life is miserable. And he's talking to the person who has made his life worse than any other human on the planet has. And he's still trying to be personable, show a little humor, be a little vulnerable by cracking a joke. And I love that we get through language just by the fact that he cracked a joke, a small one, not even a particularly funny one, but we get a big sense of who he is before he turns into what they've made him, you know?
No, definitely. That is awesome. Now, another thing that Shakespeare uses a lot is like gender disguise or cross-dressing. They appear quite a bit in Shakespeare's works. Um, you I feel like it kind of adds like a whole nother layer of comedy. How do you guys feel about that though? Like, Kate, you obviously have an opinion.
I do. I have a strong opinion, and it's a weird hot take. But one, I think that it's important to acknowledge when we talk about it that like wearing outward gender signifiers has become like unfortunately like a different type of joke in our society that oftentimes like targets trans people, and so like I feel like we have to like name that like explicitly. But the
Mhm.
other thing, and this is like completely on the other side of it, is the fact that a lot of times when we're talking about like the sort of gender swapping or like cross-dressing that happens in Shakespeare, there's also like a class consciousness that happens. And again, like talking about the people who went to Shakespeare was, you know, like going to a Shakespeare play, it was a very mixed audience. You know, you had the groundlings, you had people who were coming from far more like economic stability, like that kind of thing. And so because clothing was such a specific thing at the time, there was a lot of like class transition that happened as well. So like within the act of say a woman dressing as a man or a man dressing as a woman, you also had a woman who might have been lowering her station, or a man who might have been raising his station. And that's really interesting because then that also starts pulling in things like the the sumptuary laws and how sumptuary laws showed up in that culture, but also it became a lot of sorry, brain break. It became a commentary on like sex work and that type of thing, because many sex workers at the time would dress above their station and they would wear these like really fancy clothes. And so when you're watching like a woman dress as a man or a man dress as a woman, yes, that can arguably be very funny, but there's also like a real consciousness that comes like that Shakespeare is using, that talks about like station and moving between them, and how appearances really matter in this culture. And it gets like really spicy, I think, and like really, really interesting really quickly when you start really looking at that action of putting on the clothes of another gender in that societal context.
So yeah, I'd love to jump in here because I was excited to get to this question. Talk about a hot take. I don't actually think that any of the cross-dressing in Shakespeare is funny. Like, I don't think it contributes to the humor or is meant to contribute to the humor at all. I think when we get those scenes, I think maybe arguably Midsummer and the mechanicals, but the mechanicals are meant to be funny. It's not flute dressing in a woman's dress that is funny. That's not the funny part. The funny part is they can't act. I think that we learn so much more about Elizabethan relationship with gender and these characters' relationships with their own gender in these scenes. So, I mean, Cymbeline is my favorite play, right? So it's we're stuck with this. We're stuck with Imogen here. She learned so much about the privileged and pampered life that she's led as a princess, forever. One thing goes wrong, and all of a sudden she's not just thrown into the world having to disguise herself as a boy, but now she's essentially cast off by her husband. She's been called an adulteress. She has been made to fend for herself in the wilderness. She has nothing. And that I see a man's life as a tedious one, right? Like, that speech is full of, this is hard. And that coming to terms with her relationship with her gender versus someone like Viola coming to terms with relationship and gender. Like, it just, I don't think it's meant to be funny. I think the only maybe the Clark Kent mistaken identity, but again, that doesn't have anything to do with the clothes. That has to do with the fact that your actor playing Sebastian probably looks nothing like your actor playing Viola. Like, it's probably a 6 foot tall man and a 5'7", whatever. But like, I don't think that the comedy comes from the clothes. I think the comedy comes from the other stuff, and the clothes are a rather deep exploration of relationship with gender in an Elizabethan perspective.
I would love to jump in. Is kind of what you're saying about like the comedy comes from like the Clark Kentness of it is like also like, also it's where we see like the twin comedy come from is like, how many times are you lucky enough to actually have actual twins to work with? And I think the comedy is like buy it, they're twins, just go with it, roll, no one can tell them apart. I'm thinking like Comedy of Errors where like, you have two sets of twins. But like, I love like looking at Shakespeare and trying to ask like, how did Shakespeare write this and why did Shakespeare write this now? And, knowing that I can never understand the context of how they lived and how they performed, I love doing the mind exercise of what does this tell us about the time period? And I think, first of all, like we watch Shakespeare grow as a writer over the cross-dressing comedies. And if I could be totally wrong on this, I think Cymbeline is the last of the cross-dressing comedies he writes. And even watching how he changes writing women dressing as men, we watch his ability to assess gender dynamics mature, like so much over. And again, from like a Viola to, and Viola's like I think in the middle. Oh my God, I should have pulled up a timeline. But also, if you think about it, like going back to the sumptuary laws, these actors are also being allowed to dress above their station. So in almost like a Muppets kind of way, the play is breaking its own fourth wall. Like the act, and on top of that, you have boys playing girls who are playing boys who are playing girls. Like if you look at As You Like It, you have a boy playing a girl playing a boy who's pretending to be the girl that he's in love with. Like, that, and we're watching her like being like, we're watching we're watching the character, who again is being played by a boy, process the right way to teach a man to fall in love and court a woman. And the audience knows this. The audience is in on it. The audience knows that that's a boy who is, dressing like a princess, who's dressing like a shepherd, who's then trying to kind of look like a princess for a noble. And they're like, and the if the comedy is in there, it's the comedy that we're all in on the joke. We all know that that this guy's falling for a trick. We're watching her, manipulate, and not manipulate, but like her kind of craft and figure out like, oh, how do I make this guy into some guy who just writes me really crappy poetry and leaves it on trees into somebody I could actually live with. And again, we watch Shakespeare's own ability to assess what it's like to travel the world that has very, very specific gender roles mature as we watch the cross-dressing comedies mature. And so again, I think the comedy is not like, ooh, look it's a girl dressed as a boy, but secretly it's a boy just as a girl dressed as a boy. Like it's more recognizing, like almost kind of calling out, like the way we treat the genders is a little ridiculous because of how easily manipulated and how easily confused. And honestly, like showing it from both sides, I think is and again, getting around to Cymbeline, where we watch how like no one has it easy. And, the only way to kind of like, and, when we come around to the marriages at the end is, as the cross-dressing comedies mature, we watch those marriages become more like actual paired matches instead of, well, the play's over.
Definitely. Definitely. How about you, Rivka? What do you think?
I do want to piggyback on what Carly said with regard to specifically Rosalind in As You Like It. One of the things that she gets to do, and it is not the element of the cross-dressing, as Stephanie said, itself, but so much as we are understanding that everybody else thinks this is a boy. Rosalind gets to say some stuff about women in terms of how like intractable they are. Like, I will weep for nothing. And how clever they are and how sneaky they can be and all of that. She gets to say that as a boy, where if she was saying that, and it's excusable because we, the audience, know that's actually a woman talking about women. If it was a male character, an actual male talking about women that way, we would loathe him, right? But a woman can say, I might go sleep with your neighbor. I don't know. And I think there's another element of it too that coming from an acting perspective, more than a scholarly perspective, vulnerability is incredibly charming to an audience. And when you get, because usually it's within the first or second scene that your heroine ends up having to dress as a boy. And that almost immediately gets us on her side because she's got to be dealing with not only the circumstance that led her to dress as a boy, whether that's a shipwreck or a whatever it is, a heartbreak in Julia's case, something like that, but also that constant pressure of, I have to talk like a boy. I have to walk like a boy. I have to keep my feelings about my new master secret because this is inappropriate. So watching that character instantly be thrust into this very vulnerable position gets us on their side. And I think that aspect of it does lead to the comedy. We're far more likely to laugh in concert with what is happening to this character because we feel for her already.
Definitely. Now, again, you guys are very good at predicting what we're going to talk about next. One of the things, like, Shakespeare's comedic heroines. I mean, we've talked about it a little bit, but they defy the societal norms and expectations of their time. How do they do that? Like, why does that work? And why does that work for comedy? Specifically, I know you were talking about Rosalind and how she gets to say these things because we as the audience know she's a woman. So why are things funny because they come from women, I guess, versus not? Does that make sense? Okay. How about you, Revka? What do you think?
So I think that the comedy comes from the fact that the women in Shakespeare they almost get to play the role of the fool, by which I mean they get to say things that women of the time could not actually say out loud in their own voice, in their own opinion. But on stage, they are frequently smarter than the men. And there is this. So first of all, you've now pleased 50% of your audience who are women, getting to see women say the things they wish they could say. And secondly, I think it is done, part of Shakespeare's magic is it is done with such kindness and love. Even when the women are making fun of the men, it's not making fun of derisively. It's making fun of like, I'm going to rib you about this because we all know the real truth here. And it's done in such a loving and fond way that the men receive that information. The men in the audience could hear that with, yeah, sometimes I'm a real idiot, and sometimes my wife actually knows better than I do. And, and there's that sort of acknowledgement from, let's call it, half of the men. So now you've at least got 75% of your audience kind of going, yes, this is truth. And you may have 25% of your audience going, not in my house. I don't know. Oh,
We lost your audio, Sarah.
I can't hear you.
Oh no.
Yep, there you are.
Okay. So Kate, what do you think about this?
Oh man. The nurse is funny, I guess. I feel like one of the things that Shakespeare does really well across all of his plays is that he shows us more than one type of woman, which is honestly kind of uncommon. Like in a lot of the other sort of extant playwrights of the day, there's like lady character and she's a lady doing lady stuff because she's a lady. But with Shakespeare, like I know we're specifically talking about the comedies, but like I like the tragedies way better, so it's fine. But I mean, even across the comedies, you have all of these different types of women. You have the nurse, right? You've got Rosalind, you've got Imogen, you've got Viola, you've got Beatrice, you've got Kate. Like you have, and they're different. They feel like different people. And I think that sort of humanizing quality of we understand why Beatrice is being snarky, but it's coming from a different place than Kate, right? Like Kate and Beatrice, like I've played them both, but they're very different people and you have to play them differently. Similarly, like the nurse is a very different woman than Juliet's mom. And like the nurse is like arguably one of the best comedic roles for women. It just happens to be in a tragedy. And so I think that seeing yourself represented on stage has always been important. I think whether it's like Shakespeare or today. And so looking at this like vast sort of like array of women, it shows me that part of the comedy is in not only Shakespeare's recognition of people and that people are different and they do different things for different reasons, but also that people recognize different parts of ourselves in these different characters. And I think that really kind of speaks to how well he can do that, even with some of like these smaller characters who may not, may only have like a few lines. Maybe that's an answer.
So like, as somebody who also
Evan,
like
Go
loves,
ahead.
oh sorry,
No,
I
I
love
was
the
talking
tragedy.
while muted again. So go ahead.
Oh no! Did you have something you want to say? Okay, like as somebody who also like really loves the tragedies, I think like especially like putting up the comedies today, um, and why they're funny is like I think so many of the comedies are like flipped tragedies. Like Much Ado About Nothing is comedic Othello. Like, you know, like you have like I'm sorry, was that a hot take? No, okay, good. I saw I want to watch like Katie like collapse. Is but also like we're in a comedy to a certain to a certain extent. We know that like, but I mean, this, you know, okay, I'm about to say something and then contradict myself. We know to a certain extent they're safe. Like we can watch these women and these very complicated women, especially again in the later comedies, especially as like Shakespeare learns to write women. Like let's face it, Adriana and Luciana. Oh my god, I'm so bad with names. In Comedy of Errors are like they've some distinct acts of sisterhood, but like they're not really deep characters.
One is loud, the other one is soft.
Thank you.
Women.
I never want to like call it somebody's favorite play, but like I've directed it and I've struggled with it. I've been like,
If
well,
Comedy of Errors is your favorite play, let's chat.
Yeah.
I'm not here to shame.
Who hurt you?
But yeah, like I mean, Comedy of Errors is not deep. You know, like but you know, you work towards the later comedies and you know, like again, like we see Much Ado About Nothing. Much Ado About Nothing is there's so much danger in that play. Like again, it is like like my big thing is it is Comedy Othello. I directed them back to back one time with the same cast. It was weird. But but you know, we're watching Beatrice. We're watching a woman who is in her middle age, a woman who has abandoned society's expectations of her. We're watching a woman who like was on the path to marriage and then got her heart broken and said, you know what, I'm done. And we're watching her stand up for the other women in that show in a way that in a tragedy would get her killed. Like but like she's allowed to push back against the world of men. And Ursula, you know, pushes back a bit, and poor forgotten and underplayed often Margaret gets to push back a little bit, depending on how you stage her. And you know, hero to her own way, you know, in the world of like this is what an obedient woman looks like, still listens to her cousin, you know, and watching these women push back against the world of men and seeing the world of men get real lost and confused real fast when they push up against it, I think is where I like to play the comedy today. You know, seeing Viola and Olivia and like, and, you know, depending on how you cast Festi and things like that, like watching these women go up against the world of men and watching, and like in the safety of a comedy where like, you know, it's going to end in marriage, but knowing that we can push those boundaries and we can play against it, and watching Shakespeare bounce these incredibly intelligent women. I mean, looking at Viola, I don't know why she's going for Orsino. He must be really hot. Like, he's not that interesting. Like, again, in directing it, you're like, Viola, you are dynamic and interesting. And she's got that incredibly wonderful line where she's, I'm all the daughters in my house and all the sons too, where like she has a moment where she realizes like, oh, I might be an orphan. Like, I'm flirting with this guy. He thinks I'm a boy. Also, my brother's probably dead. I might be an orphan. I might actually be all the children in my household right now. Crap. But like, you know, you're watching this incredibly interesting and dynamic woman, and there's this dude over here who's like, I just like music, and this girl won't talk to me. Like, he's super, like, watching those dynamics, I think, is fascinating and fun. And like watching, and like, in As You Like It, like those two women, blanking on the names, but Shakespeare shows us again so much about the world of women that he understands. Like they have incredible acts of friendship. They are so committed to each other to stay together and to stand with each other and to push back against like the absurdity of her father being exiled and she getting exiled. And again, like the wrestling, like, you know, watching them talk through the wrestling match is we're watching these two very intelligent women who talk through their problems and work through things together, go up against a world where like, I'm going to do a wrestling match to accomplish things, even though that guy is probably going to kill me. Like, that's that's what I like to see, the juxtaposition of the comedy today. But again, you change little things. Like, for example, Taming of the Shrew to me is not a comedy. You can play it like a dark comedy, but it's not a comedy. Is playing, like, again, you change little things about those shows and they get very dark very fast. So I think playing against the danger while pointing out the absurdity is where I think the comedies are deliciously rich. And they're like, again, women getting to talk openly about sex constantly. Getting to call out the world of sex, like getting to call out all those expectations, I think is where it's really fun to play up the kind of pointing out the absurdities of the world they exist in.
Definitely. How about you, Stephanie? Do you have any thoughts?
The only thing I'll add is that I think we do these plays a disservice by calling them comedies. I think that we end in a wedding plays, and we end in death, and we end in a change of kings would be a much better delineation of these plays than anything else, because I think Romeo and Juliet is one of the funniest Shakespeare plays. And like, it
Act
should
one
be acts 1 through 3 until Mercutio dies.
Yeah.
That play is funny as heck.
Yeah.
And so, like, I laugh more in that play than Much Ado, and Much Ado is one of my favorite plays. Much Ado is great for the gulling scenes, and that's it. Like, in terms of like laughing comedy, the rest of it is like an examination of relationships and trust. It's not funny. And so, like, basically whatever happens in Act 5, it's either death or marriage, and sometimes both in the histories. But like, yeah, I don't know. That's the only thing that I have to say, is that like categorizing them as comedy in a modern sense, because obviously that was not the Elizabethan sense. That if you said comedy, people were not expecting to laugh; they were expecting to see romance or marriage. And even in like a Netflix holiday rom-com, we know that Act 4 of that movie is going to be the lowest point. It's going to be the breakup of the wedding. We're prepared for that modern sense of what a rom-com is. And it's pretty similar. It's just that in Shakespeare, the tragedies go from rom-com further down and the comedies take a swoop up at the end.
Well, one of the things, and Stephanie, you kind of just transitioned right into there, is the question is should Shakespeare, like modern Shakespeare productions, should they be adapted to suit a contemporary sensibility and audience, or should they remain more true to their original context? And Stephanie, I'm gonna ask you first.
Shakespeare's dead. He's super dead. He doesn't care. I think that Shakespeare should be heavily edited. And if you are not a careful and conscientious editor, you have no business doing Shakespeare. I don't want to gatekeep. I'm not here to gatekeep. But if you're not willing to put in the work, I'm going to gatekeep, because lazy Shakespeare is why people don't like Shakespeare. Lazy Shakespeare that doesn't take into consideration that there is racist and misogynist and everything is Shakespeare. All of it's in there. Shakespeare was not a feminist. Sorry. Like, he wasn't. He was a man in the 16th century. He was not a feminist. And there's a lot of language that needs to be edited out in order to make it. Yes, you can find yourself in Shakespeare, but the director and mainly the editor has to do work to pull you in to let you find yourself.
I want to yes and that.
Yeah.
Because I have a very specific instance. Because that's something that we as a company have been doing is, you know, if language is being used gratuitously, and it doesn't, if it's not necessary to what's going on, then we have been excising certain phrases or certain lines in order not to do harm. But our artistic director, Jeff, just played Prospero for the 50th time or something like that. And he refers to Caliban as a slave. That is typically one of the words that we've taken out. He insisted for himself that that word be kept in because he says it speaks to who Prospero is. that character would use that kind of language to refer to another human being is important. So in that case, we keep that in. If it's just a random person making a misogynistic or an anti-Semitic joke or a whatever, then yes, excise it. That's not necessary. So yes, and depending on the context.
Yeah, Prospero. I don't want to swear, but Prospero, Sucks is. I hate him, and the audience should too.
He's not a good guy. No, he's not a good guy, and that's the point that our artistic director was making. Is I am the hero of the show, but I'm not someone you want to emulate. You know, and I kind of felt the same way about I happened to play Witch 3, who's the one who has, so by the way, Rivka Levine is a very Jewish name, in case you didn't know. And I played the witch that has the line, she drops in the pot, liver of blaspheming Jew. And the director asked me if I felt comfortable saying that. And I said, I do, because nobody wants to emulate the witches. These are not people to aspire to be. So in that case, the fact that she's talking about the nose of a Turk and Tartar's lips, and she's using some really ugly language, but because it's her, I felt comfortable saying it. If I was playing a heroine that we were supposed to aspire to be, then no, we may not speak that language.
Kate, I think you had something to add.
Oh, I mean, this art, like, there's so many different schools of thought on this argument, but like, my argument is basically like, whenever anybody's like, you can't change the text, I go, what does prenzy mean? What does it mean? Tell me what it means. Look me in the eye. Tell me what it means. Some stuff doesn't play anymore because we have culturally lost the relevance of that, what was probably a super funny meme at the time. Like, I bet that joke killed, when it was originally in measure, but like, we don't know what that word means anymore. Like, we have like an idea, but like, all right, whatever. And so like, I think that, everything Rivka said is right. Basically, that's what I'm trying to say here. Thank you. End of comment.
How about you, Carly? Do you have anything to add?
Yeah, and I mean, to the Shakespeare like purists out there, is like, first of all, Shakespeare edited his own work. Like they were constantly revising these plays to make them more palatable. And also, like, more to the point, Shakespeare did this too. Like King Lear, Hamlet, they're not original plays. They're not. Somebody else wrote earlier versions of them, and he was like, hey, these were popular and they were pretty good, but like, they're super outdated. Let's redo them. Like, he did that with a number of his plays. Titus Andronicus, his biggest like summer blockbuster of his own time period, was a redo of somebody else's work. Like, he did this himself. That's how he got himself famous and popular. That's how he became the voice we are still using 500 years later. Is he adapted and he changed and he edited, and that's why we have first folio and second folio and quarto this and quarto that. Like, he was constantly revising these plays. He was constantly probably taking things that an actor said and was like, oh, hey, that's really good, let's add that in. And just supporting the hell out of what Stephanie was saying too, and what Rivka was saying, is you have to be a conscious editor. You can't just be like, ooh, this section looks long, cut it. I do actually cut a lot of the Act 3 monologues, though, where they catch everybody up who just came from the bear baiting next door. I do cut a lot of those. But like you can't sit there on a purist like pedestal and be like, no, we're going to do it exactly as Shakespeare wrote it, because that doesn't even exist. That does not exist. And again, Shakespeare was contemporizing works in his own time that are some of the greatest plays we have. And I frankly do love Titus. It's not the best, but I do love it. It's super fun to stage. So yeah, like, you can't stand on a purist standpoint and also claim to know Shakespeare.
Definitely. Well, we're just about up on time, but one of the things I wanted to ask is, if any character from Shakespeare were to go to Dragon Con, who would you choose to bring with you? And what mischief might they get into when they were there? Um, Carly, I'm gonna ask you.
No, because my first response is terrible.
No terrible answers here.
Oh, I haven't said it yet. I honestly, my first gut response, because I love chaos, is I would bring Pericles. I would watch him. No, I'm okay. Listen, I'm going to qualify that because I know that play. I know how it ends. I have staged it sarcastically. But you know what? Like that play is bonkers. That play is bonkers. Like that. I mean, it starts with the fates telling him to get out of there because the woman he's courting is sleeping with her father. I think there's 5 shipwrecks. A girl gets abducted by pirates in an early version of a smash cut because he needs to get her somewhere else. Like the play's bananas. It's nuts. It's like it's the one you stage because you have to eventually. And I love the absurdity of it. I don't know, again, if this is your favorite play, I'm sorry. But I think bringing like the world of Dragon Con, I think would just be so much fun to watch Pericles be a hot mess in. It would. It'd be super fun.
Definitely. How about you, Stephanie?
I'm gonna go with points from the Hal series, because that man can party, and he is going to go along with whatever you do. He loves to cosplay. He'll dress up as anything. Like he'll put on a little disguise and steal a treasure. He'll do anything. He'll say it's 4 a.m. and let's go to the next party. Absolutely. Heck yeah. He doesn't have enough status to have like an entourage or security, but he knows all of the famous people, so he can get you in to meet them. He's like the perfect mix of approachable and connected and also drunk.
Definitely. How about you, Rivka? Who would you bring to Dragon Con?
I would bring Rosalind from Love's Labor's Lost because I would love to introduce her to the Marvel universe, especially Loki, because I think that she would say, "That's it. That's how I want to live the rest of my life," and carry on from there.
How about you, Kate?
I would bring Dogberry, with the reason being that all of my friends, when I first started coming to Dragon Con, were like Dragon Con volunteers and security people. And I feel like I just want to introduce Dogberry to all my Dragon Con security friends and then go out partying after because I just feel like he would fit in with a lot of my friends.
Nothing wrong with that. No, definitely. I think they're all very good answers. Now we are up on time. Obviously this panel is coming from you in the past, but I would still like you guys to say where can people find you online? Where can they find you at the con if you're gonna be at the con? Um, and yeah, let us know where can we stalk you some more? How about you, Kate?
Oh, I was praying that you wouldn't start with me, but here we go. Hey, everybody, I'm Kate Osborne. I go by Katiosaurus on all the corners of the internet. I split my time educating about ADHD and TTRPG, so you can find more about me at katiosaurus.com. Here at DragonCon, I'm doing a ton of panels and a ton of games with the beautiful Stephanie Gill Granddaughters. What up? So if you want to check out the DragonCon digital media track, you can find me there. You can also find me playing some games with Hero Forge and Kobold Press, and a bunch of other ones. So just, go follow me on the socials and see what I get up to. I don't know why my voice is getting so high, but I'm going to stop. Okay, bye.
Stephanie.
You can find me at P2M Pod on TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter for now. Who knows? Tomorrow. If you want to listen to if you want to listen to a podcast that doesn't take Shakespeare very seriously, loves yelling a lot, like I clearly do, protest too much, is the podcast for you. If you want to follow my TikTok, right now I'm doing a series where I find an adoptable dog in Austin and I talk about why that dog would be perfect in one of the Shakespeare plays. So that's been fun. That's the kind of content you can expect from me on the internet. At Dragon Con, I will probably be holed up in the Hilton basement for like the whole weekend. I will be doing a lot of stuff on the digital media track, some things on Brit track as well. So yeah, there's going to be some exciting Shakespeare content heading your way. So stay tuned.
How about you, Carly? Where can people find you?
So you can find me online with my company. I run Intrammersive Media. That is INTRA. Oh my God, spelling my own company's name. INTRAMERSIVE. We are a live action role playing game company that also works so people can walk right in off the streets and do theatrical live action role playing with us. I am not going to be at Dragon Con because I'm going to be in rehearsal. So if you want to catch up with me, you can come to Salem in October and see the show that I'll be rehearsing over the course of Dragon Con. We're working with the House of Seven Gables to put up a really spooky show about body snatching that is fully interactive. So if you want to come and change the outcome, change the world, and get into the story, you can come join us there. I don't have a podcast because I can't stick to deadlines.
And Rivka, where can people find you?
You can find me just down the street from Dragon Con at the Shakespeare Tavern Playhouse. I will not be in the show that's playing during Dragon Con. I will also be rehearsing a show, Troilus and Cressida. That's not one that gets performed a whole lot, but we'll be doing that in September. At Dragon Con, you can find me with ARTC. That is Atlanta Radio Theater Company. I'll be performing with them, I think Friday night, but I don't know for certain. But in any event, look for ARTC. And if you happen to be, if you are local or nearby and happen to be around during the spring, you may find me at the Georgia Renaissance Festival playing with the band Old Soul Silk Road.
Awesome. Well, that is awesome. As far as myself, you can find me basically all over the place. I'm doing panels on Filk. I'm doing panels on American sci-fi lit. I am doing panels with American sci-fi media classics. You can find me all over the place. We as a group, even though we are not a track, we are collaborating with several of the tracks to put on theater content at con. So by all means, please come support us. We have been working so hard on these panels, and we really want to become a home for more theater content at con. And if you want to see more theater content at con, come support our panels. Be there, be loud, project, as I say. Anyway, tomorrow you will find our next panel, which is Stagecraft Secrets, the art of writing for theater. Again, that will be right here on our YouTube channel. And we will post that at about 10 a.m. And in the meantime, make sure you drink water, eat food, and take a shower, and have a wonderful and safe Dragon Con. Bye.